cracks me up every time. Here we go, folks. Hope everybody is having a good day thus far. I see Zane is here, Helter, Dragon, Bams, John is here so far. Helter says, I can be seen and heard. D'Lo made it. D'Lo made it early. Zane says they see an ad. Dear God, I don't believe it. Because I'm already in trouble. I'm already in trouble. For those of you who can see this, I'll show you here real quickly. This is me in trouble. Anarchy is here. Says rural Minnesota. Minnesota. And Zane says that the video has ad revenue. Yeah, unless I get a strike halfway through it, because that has happened, and I got a warning right in the middle of the thing. Prime says I was going to joke and bust you on being late, but you're spot on. Don't ruin my joke again. Oh, and Zane says a Domino's ad. Okay, that's interesting. Stacy said happy Friday. And D'Lo says California in the building. But you see right here, that's an email I just got today giving me a strike and telling me they're taking a video down that I put up over a year ago that was already restricted because they age restricted the video, so nobody could even see it. If you age restrict the video, it can't be found in search results. You have to have the link to find it. So now this is a way for them to strike it twice. And they're calling it misinformation because of I talked about the flu and getting a poke for. Talked about the news story in that video. Some of you I don't know if you ever saw it. Because Slinka is here. All People has joined us. Places You Can't Go is here. As we Zane says you're getting grabbed. Captain of that ship complained to the military, or complained. The CDC sent them a letter, said basically, hey, that stuff doesn't hardly work anyways, don't complain. So yeah, it don't work, but misinformation. And there's my strike. Well, second strike on the same video. Bingo says they actually got the notification on time. There's Keisha joining us today. DH is here as I call out a few people. D'Lo gives me a lot of thumbs up. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the thumbs up I can get. As you well know, the rumor has it, folks, that the thumbs up helps with the algorithm, but I don't believe that for a minute. I don't believe it, but I appreciate it. Preparedness says hello. They have joined us this afternoon, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending upon where you happen to be in the world. Hope everything is going all right. We are in trying times indeed. Trying times indeed. Thanks again to everybody who has helped out and participated with the GoFundMe project. And I've had, again, several people request of me to keep that GoFundMe open for a while. So it will stay open for a while. I'll do that, certainly. Very much appreciated. And of course, that is for our stray cat project, if you will. Oh, man, there's a lot to talk about in the media. A lot to talk about in the media. And Zane says that they are in Central Valley, California. And places you can't go is in Oklahoma. I've been to Oklahoma. I've not been to California. I've been to the airport in California, going other places, but I've never been to California. Keisha says there's an old Chinese curse that says, may you live in interesting times. Yeah, well, we're there. We're there. And this is from Politico, and it says Biden announces action on heat as nation sizzles. And we already talked about this yesterday, that although they're claiming that we're seeing the highest temperatures on record, that it is not true, that we had higher temperatures in the 1930s than we're experiencing now in the United States. It isn't true. That is false. You won't get anybody to admit it, but it's false. And now he's going to have action on heat as nation sizzles. I have not read this article yet. I'm about to read it. I'll read it out loud, obviously, because I know some people are listening and not watching, and that's fine. I appreciate it. Broadcasting, of course, simultaneously so far on Coffee Talk Live on YouTube and on Prepper University on YouTube. Preparedness wants to know if AC units become part of this war. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm willing to bet that all they're going to do is fund a bunch more committees. But like I said, I haven't actually read this one yet. I'm about to here. So this is Politico again, talking about Biden. President Joe Biden unveiled a series of measures Thursday designed to aid workers and residents facing severe health threats from soaring temperatures as record heat shows no signs of relenting. Biden ticked off the devastating impacts of the recent heat wave across the country: death, threats to vulnerable people like the elderly and unhoused, workplace safety concerns, lost economic productivity, destructive wildfires, and risks to fisheries. The wide-ranging perils underscored that climate change has affected everyone in the country. And this is a quote here. It says, even those who deny that we're in the midst of a climate crisis can't deny the impact extreme heat is having on Americans, Biden said during an event with administration officials and the mayors of Phoenix and San Antonio. And of course, that would be Texas. The push comes as scientists with the UN World Meteorological Organization said July is on track to become Earth's hottest month on record. On track. There's your key phrasing. July is on track to become Earth's hottest month on record, which means that it's not. Washington, D.C. flirted with a triple-digit heat index as the broadest swath of the continental U.S. endured the type of sweltering heat that's affecting major cities, Phoenix and Miami, in recent weeks. And I'll tell you right now, in Georgia, it says it's 90 degrees where I am. The Biden administration said the Labor Department would increase inspections at job sites to prevent heat stress, noting heat is a top weather-related killer in the United States at more than 600 deaths annually. Biden said the Occupational Safety and Health Administration already has conducted 2,600 workplace inspections as part of a new heat safety initiative. Okay, so there's your money. There's your money. There it goes. And I'll tell you right now, for a country that has nearly 400 million people in it, 600 deaths a year is a very, very small number. It really is. The White House will also said it will spend $7 million from the Inflation Reduction Act to improve weather forecasting and $152 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law to expand water storage. How are you going to do that? So you're taking money that's meant to fix inflation and spending it, so it's not going to help inflation. And to improve weather forecasting, how much more can you improve it? Because as far as weather forecasting go, I mean, I know it's not perfect, but it's about as good as it's ever been. And 152 million for expanding water storage. How are you going to do that? Labor Department moves to issue a heat alert reminding workers of their rights can advance public awareness of the health dangers from high temperatures. People already know it's dangerous when it's high temperatures, especially on the job. And you don't need to spend more money on committees and more money on going out and harassing businesses to remind people that they need some water sometimes. I mean, seriously, what a waste. Peter says they're putting almost all landscaping businesses out of business by banning small engines such as mowers. Yeah. Zane says I may have gotten that backwards. Huma is red, Okla is people. Prime Mover says I live in Central Florida. No dead old people from the heat yet. Yeah. Like I said, they said 600 a year. That's when you consider how many people are actually in this country. 600 a year may sound callous for me to say it, but that's a really good number. That is a very extremely low number by comparison. Peter says heat index is not the temperature. That's right. Preparedness says if you notice, the new way of projecting temperatures is to have red on the map. Yeah, because then it looks Republican. Preparedness says weather reports. Have you noticed the new? Oh, that's the same thing. It was on there twice. Zane says in Central America, kidney failure has risen. Yeah, it's probably because of all of the shots. Peter says 10 times more people die every year from the cold. Dragon says lots of financially struggling Americans have to carry the burden of climate change agenda. Meanwhile, all elites are still flying private jets and super yachts. Yeah. Places says things are good on the reservation. He's talking about being on a reservation. So I try not to read too many people's side conversations, but of course I read enough of the comments as they fly through, so the people that are listening get an idea of the conversation. Zane says kidney failure is a result of overheating, wet bulb pressure, and increased sweating. And Helter says they think we're all brainless pansies who need to be told how to wipe our tushies. Think smart, watch out for the others who may put themselves in distress and stay alive. Yeah, well, they haven't gotten around to the 3 seashells yet. Something from Demolition Man, if you remember. And Monkey says, oh, what's up, guys? We're talking about more money wasting or on the temperature heat in July. Yes, more money being wasted on committees and driving around to work sites to harass workers about things they're already aware of. And there's how Hasdrubal has joined the conversation here today. Thanks for popping in. But yeah, there you go. Wasting money. Wasting more money on something people are already aware of. I love how they always have a photo of him that looks crazy. Biden always looks crazy in every picture. That looks nuts. But again, they're just siphoning more money off into areas where they're not needed for a situation that's, again, negligible. 600 a year out of the US population. That's not a bad number at all, because I think we're close to 400 million, right? US population 2023 projections, according to the world's the census, if I can get an honest number. Well, this says 335 million. I bet you it's closer to 4, because they can't count everybody. Monkey says, I watch Blue Collar Shorts, and anytime OSHA comes about, everybody's suddenly on break for the rest of the day, and the safety man is sacrificed. Yeah, well, I mean, people know what they're doing. They're either going to do right or they're not, and no OSHA and no inspections or anything is going to fix it. All people says 600 number. That 600 number is 0.00098% of the population. Yeah, blisteringly low numbers. Peter says they're getting desperate and need the next big thing to push their agenda. And Dragon says the government can barely control corruption. It thinks it can control the weather. What's next? Invisibility, and people can sprout wings and fly. They only do that in Area 51. But when you're talking to the general population, remember, most people are not that smart. All right, I'm on that a lot. Most people are not that smart. So when they go out there and they 600 people a year die, the average person's like, wow, 600. And it doesn't occur to them to look at the big picture. How many people are there? And is 600 really a big number? You know what I mean? So Places says, do they census people in tents? I have no idea. Probably not. Nature Nerd says everyone that survived the flood was obsessed with the weather, which is why their atheist ancestors are also obsessed with panicking about the weather. Oh, Cougar made it. Thanks for joining us here, Cougar. And Peter says it's the New World Order. Yeah, they've been promising that for a long time. And speaking of that, here's a news story that's interesting to me for a completely different reason than you might think. I'm going to share it with you here since you brought up the NWO. And Monkey says, also today I did some workouts for 45 minutes referencing the weight loss pill from yesterday on my VR headset, good for boxing and combat rhythm. That's good. And Preparedness says, most people are too distracted, too busy to even stop and think about things in general. I agree. And Zane says, what do atheists have to do with it? I don't know. But that's what they say. BAM says 2022 estimating that 42,795 people died in motor vehicle traffic crashes. Yeah. Kaslinka says, are you allowed to say NWO? Maybe I can pretend I'm talking about WCW, and then I can say it. Cruising says, I was sitting at school board meeting Tuesday. They were making a system for kids not taking out books. Their parents don't want them to read. Millions spent on it. My mother just bopped me with the book. Savage is here. Says, hope everyone is staying cool. 117 here in my neck of the desert. Chilling, cleaning my 1911. Best handgun in the universe. The aliens told me. Cruising says, government finds ways to make things insanely expensive, being the point of the story. Of course they do. And Bingo says, ain't that my luck? I finally make it on here on time. And of course, I get a phone call and miss the first 15 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And all people said, and did any of the 600 have pre-existing health conditions? Yeah, because they might be counted as being having demised from the C virus. And Zane says, I used to not believe in the NWO. Now I see some validity to it. Yep. And again, speaking of that, this article, which is from Entertainment Hollywood, says Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson donates unprecedented 7 figures to striking actors. That is not true. Not exactly. And I'm going to read this article and I'm going to talk about this a little bit. And this is important, actually. Of the 160,000 SAG members, roughly 2,700 of the union's highest earners received a letter from SAG Foundation's president, Courtney B. Vance. Now, it says SAG-AFTRA. It's not really SAG-AFTRA. And they have a retraction at the very, very bottom of this page that I noticed. And so it's a little misleading. And no one ever looks to the bottom to see if there's a retraction. But it is SAG we're talking about, Screen Actors Guild. And it says Executive Director Sid Wilson detailing the need for financial assistance amid the work stoppage. Johnson's, where are we? This is bouncing all over the place. It's hard to read it. It's trying to put a pop-up ad on here, and that's why it's bouncing around. Johnson's 7-figure donation is the largest lump sum the foundation has received from a single donor since it was founded in 1985, a representative told Huffington Post, referring to it as a milestone. The exact amounts of Johnson's donation has not been disclosed. However, Wilson told Variety, which first reported the news on Monday, that the sum will likely help thousands of members through the union's emergency financial assistance program. And I'm going to jump down here to the correction, right? It says previously in the story, misidentified the organization that received the donation. It's the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, a group associated with the union. So he did not give money to SAG. He gave it to SAG-AFTRA. It's a 7-figure sum that's undisclosed, but if it's a 7-figure sum, it's upwards of $1 million. Now, yeah, and Peter says, how about he donates 7 figures to Angel Studios? As I try to catch up a little bit on here. And Zane says, I used to not believe in the NWO. Now I see validity to it. And Erikel says, medical malpractice deaths is huge. They never talk about it. No, most of the time they can't talk about it because they sign non-disclosure agreements. Where are we here? I'll catch up a little more. Prime Mover says LeBron James' son almost died of a heart attack at age 18. Time to check his shot records. Peter says he had 3. Helder says he doesn't care about those actors. This is a business move for him. Donating a couple of million tax write-offs makes it public. Then he'll triple his money back with his business. Is more to it than that. First of all, problem number one, why do you pay union dues if you're in a union? The reason you pay union dues if you're in a union, or so they tell you, is so that in times of financial stress, they can help their union members. So why do you need SAG-AFTRA in the first place to take donations to help people who are on strike if the union is supposed to be taking care of that? That's number one. Number two is Dwayne Johnson. Whenever he pops up in the news, it's something like this. And this is the real reason I wanted to talk about it, was to talk about Dwayne Johnson a little bit, because there's a lot more going on here than people realize. Dragon says, it's hard for me to feel sad for people who make millions and millions a year and they haven't got enough to live in their multi-million dollar homes anymore because they didn't manage their money better. Yeah, and a lot of people who are celebrities end up going broke because they live a lifestyle that they can't uphold. And Cougar made a $10 donation to the channel and says, hope it helps with the pet food. Yes, absolutely it does. Thank you very much, Cougar. It's very much appreciated. Again, and I don't have any cats in here today. There's no cats in the room, unfortunately. They're all over the place, but not here. But yeah, of course, our stray cats that we take care of. That means a lot. Thank you, Cougar. Now, the reason I'm talking about Dwayne Johnson is whenever you see him in the news, it's a fluff piece like this, where he's making a donation, or he's talking about his humble beginnings, or he has his show, the Dwayne Johnson show that was on cable, or whatever the hell it was, which has been attacked for being wildly inaccurate, that people are like, that's not how he grew up. And indeed, it is not. He does not have humble beginnings. He's been getting groomed for what, damn near 50 years. Okay. Always hanging around with celebrities, always flying around all over the world, even as a young kid. All right. Always with important people, always involved in the wrestling business, being groomed for acting and so on. And you get these fluff piece stories of Dwayne Johnson made a donation. Dwayne Johnson did this and that. Dwayne Johnson plays with this kid. This is what you see. Or like I did a video some months ago about him with the 7-Eleven. Dwayne Johnson has guilt because of stealing Snicker bars because he was so hungry as a young man on his way to the gym every day when he lived in Hawaii, and he would steal a Snicker bar. And so he bought Snicker bars and gave them away at a 7-Eleven. And I'm like, yeah, bullshit. He was so poor he couldn't afford a Snicker bar. You want to know who Dwayne Johnson is? Dwayne Johnson is your true Manchurian candidate. Here's my prediction. All of this, the constant, decades of grooming into wrestling, into acting, and into the public eye like this with these fluff pieces and these BS PR programs. This is your Manchurian candidate. That one of these days they're going to run him for public office. Okay? You want to talk about your Antichrist. Maybe the Antichrist is someone who doesn't even realize that he was. he has no idea even what he was stepping into, because you're already dealing with someone, again, groomed from day one, but done in a way that people actually like this guy. It's not like LeBron James, who's been groomed from day one and everybody hates him. People actually like Dwayne Johnson because of the wrestling ties and because of the acting and because of charity fluff pieces. I don't even think he realizes what's in store for him, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him running for public office in the next 10 years. And people will eat it up because they don't know any better. And even he doesn't know what he's getting himself into. Just like the Manchurian candidate. Didn't know what they had in store for him or how they were using him. That's why I wanted to talk about that. Bam says, well, here it's legally hidden if somebody dies suddenly, whether they're jabbed or not. And Peter says 150,000 people die every year in the USA alone from prescription drugs taken as prescribed. Yeah. Zane says, didn't a superstar recently become a homeless crackhead? That happens a lot. I don't know if you're talking about anybody specific. Places says, right there, dinner last night was more than I get all month. And Bam says, Dwayne on steroids needs attention. Some other things here about the WWE from Zane. He had that show Ballers. Oh, and Tom is here. Thanks for joining us today, Tom. Zane, he was a big athlete. Has Drupal says The Rock jokes about eating kids, not a fan. And he's on board with all of that. If you've ever seen his sketches on Saturday Night Live, they're appalling. Remember, he's the one that had the young person's molestation robot scene or a sketch on Saturday Night Live. So he's on board with all of that. And Cruising says my teachers union collects $600 a year from my dues. They get involved when my contract is violated, etc. But $400 of that goes to the NEA national level that uses it to lobby for bizarre political things. Yeah, and but it's supposed to be used to help you with legal issues, with emergencies, funerals, things like that. You know, a strike, and they help to compensate you with a strike. That's where it's supposed to go, but it's not where it ends up. If the money's not all stolen, which often happens with unions, especially like firefighters and police unions, they get ripped off all the time. And then there's no money, which is why they need charities to bury people. And that's absolutely unacceptable. Places says WWE is predictive programming. Yeah, but that's the life he grew up in. Cruising, we're still talking about unions here in the comment section as I catch up. Says, however, you cannot support the local unit without the national union getting their cut. Even making a new union by law, it has to be associated with the national one. That's ridiculous. And Fluke Man says, wouldn't DJ have to pay to use the gym? Yeah, of course. But I'm sure he didn't have to, because I'm sure it had been set up by what was then the WWF. Remember, his father was a professional wrestler. And even as an adolescent, Dwayne Johnson in real life had a close connection with Vince McMahon anyways. He was well taken care of. There's all kinds of childhood photos of him with celebrities in different states and different countries. This kid was not barefoot, like living in a hut running around in Hawaii, okay? Having to steal Snicker bars. It's all BS. It's all propaganda. Peter says, having worked with many in Hollywood, I found so many to be complete narcissists and many of these A-list names. And yeah, like Schwarzenegger, says Zane. And All People says, wasn't The Rock's dad an Olympic gold medalist? He was a professional wrestler. I'm not sure about the gold medalist, but I know he was he was in Vince McMahon's circle. Preparedness says fake idolization. Zane says, yeah, I don't buy that. Ooh, I'm way behind here. I'm so sorry. And Fluke Man says, I'm late again. It's all right. You're still here. Has Drupal says, spot on. All People said, wasn't. Yeah, that's the same thing again here as I catch up. Cruising said, Dwayne Johnson was just talking about running for president back in 2016, right after Trump was elected. There you go. And Stacy says, oh my God, I didn't know nothing about Dwayne Johnson. That's interesting. And Zane says SNL is fake and not a picture of anyone's beliefs. Yeah, well, Saturday Night Live used to be a cultural phenomenon. It has been riding on the coattails of its attraction in the 1970s. In the 1970s, it was so innovative and such a big thing. And most of you are not old enough to remember this. They used to pull down the big screen and use like the old screen projection televisions in college frat houses and stuff. They used to have parties around Saturday Night Live coming on in the evening in the 70s. It was massive. It was a massive, innovative show. But as time has worn on and it has gotten more programmed, more political, more socially oriented, it's turned into garbage. It hasn't been relevant for more than 20 years, but it hangs on its nostalgia. But yeah, I wouldn't want anything to do with them now. Stacy says, I mean, I know about him, but not stuff like this. I'm shocked. And Armored says, remember back in school when most of your classmates had random heart problems? Yeah, me neither. Yeah. And Cruising says, by the Florida Constitution's teachers, firefighter, police, etc., cannot strike. It's illegal with jail time, and you're barred from holding these positions ever again in the state. That's interesting. And Zane says Hawaii is very expensive. It can be very expensive to live in Hawaii. That's true. And Zane says, even if you are mainland rich, you could. Yeah, it's got a very bad. You want to know what it's really like in Hawaii? Now it's not clicking. I'm trying to put the comments up. Zane is saying, is that bad economy? Is the economy that bad in Hawaii? Watch Dog the Bounty Hunter, because Dog the Bounty Hunter goes back and forth. The show's bullshit, anyways, but he goes back and forth between what is but he goes into real Hawaii, not tourist Hawaii, and it looks like it's all housing projects. It's a disaster. Armored wants to know if there's a dating app for the uneducated or unjuicinated. Excuse me. I don't know. That's a good question. That's a really good question. Prime says if it wasn't for SNL, there'd be no Adam Sandler. They fired him because he wasn't funny enough. They fired Damon Wayans too for going off script. Fired on the spot. He didn't even finish out the night. Nature Nerd is here. He says, why should taxpayer teachers have a union at all? Disrupts education at any time, and bank rusts the taxpayer with all their unnecessary and pay raises, budget and increases. As I catch up here. And Cruising says Hawaii is horrible for working class people. And Nature Nerd says no other government services have unions. And then Peter says, you think Hawaii is expensive? Try Switzerland. Yeah, no kidding. But that's just my warning about Dwayne Johnson, is that is absolutely he is the true Manchurian candidate. He's been getting groomed from day one, and he probably doesn't even see it himself. And because he's always lived a sheltered, controlled, protected life, he's dangerously out of touch with the common man. So he would not make good decisions. He'd make the decisions he's told to make, ultimately. Where are we here? Hasdrubal said in the UK they're getting rid of the records of who has gotten it. Interesting. Now, this is from Reuters. And this is Reuters, and this is the true test of hypocrisy. It says U.S. Senate Democrats pushed the Buy America bills ahead of tough 2024 elections. So now we're pretending like we want to buy American. And I thought this article was interesting because it's very hypocritical of the direction that they go in. It says Washington facing uphill re-election battles in 2024. Vulnerable Senate Democrats are pushing legislation that promotes Buy America policies, attempting to bolster their party on a brand of economic populism they hope will keep them in the majority. The Senate Commerce Committee, on Thursday advanced a bill from Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin and Republican Senator J.D. Vance to require country of origin labeling for goods sold online, bringing them in line with brick and mortar goods. On Wednesday, a Senate committee approved Democratic Senator Sherwood Brown's bill requiring all American flags bought by the U.S. government be made in the United States. And last week, the Senate passed an amendment for Baldwin to an annual defense policy bill requiring the Navy to build ships in the United States with American materials. Shouldn't we be doing that already? And that's really kind of the point. And just like earlier this week when I talked about the light bulbs, they're shutting down the incandescent bulb industry completely in the United States and demanding that we use all LED bulbs now by fining companies that buy or sell incandescent bulbs. Something like, what is it, $527 per bulb, which can add up to millions for the company. Incandescent bulbs are still made in the United States. LED bulbs all have to be imported, which means that you've just killed an entire American industry, but now you want us to buy American. I mean, seriously, think about that. And Peter says, do you remember when Buy American under Trump was racist? Yeah, no kidding. And Armored says the purpose of public education is to finance do-nothing jobs for privileged bureaucrats. It's partially brainwashing, partially controlling, because the alternative, one of the main reasons why they started public education in the first place was because there were gangs of kids just running around in the streets with nothing to do, and it was dangerous. It was causing a lot of problems. How do you get the public behind the idea of rounding up children every day and keeping them all in one place? Well, we'll give you a free education, because back then it was expensive and it was very desirable to get a formal education, but at least they actually taught you something back there. And I'm not picking on you cruising. I know that you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Cruising here is actually working in the public school system. But yeah, it started off as a way to just keep all these kids, keep an eye on all these children. And Dubois was very much against it. W.B. Dubois, or W.B. Dubois, he said we need ditch diggers as well as doctors. He was dead set against public school, but it's turned into a propaganda machine now, unfortunately. And Cruising here says, where are we? Do we know why LEDs are all foreign made and none made domestically? I have no idea, but the majority of them comes from China. They're manufactured in China. So it's like, all right, what are we doing here? Why are we killing an industry? Because 50% of bulb sales to domestic use, that is to homes, is still incandescent bulbs, because people prefer them. That natural light, it's easier on the eyes. The LED bulbs, ultimately, they're not cheaper, they don't last as long, and they don't really affect your electric bill all that much, that we're going to be forced by the federal government to buy LED bulbs now. But you killed an entire industry, and now you're trying to convince me that you want us to buy American? It's ridiculous. And Cruising says, right on. Thanks for giving them the history lesson. People shitting on teachers today are the same nimrods that didn't think plumbers and electricians were important. But hey, come here, Uncle. Come here. Come here. Good boy. Good boy. Hey, everybody. Let me close that out so you can see. And I love how they respond to their name, and they do show up. Here is Uncle. That is 20 pounds of cat, ladies and gentlemen. Former abandoned feral animal who is now a huge baby. Hi. Hi. He's now a huge baby. This is one of the strays that we take care of. Only he has adopted himself, because he will not even go to an exterior door now. He doesn't want to go outside anymore, do you? No, that's all right. Here, I'll put you back down so I can finish what I'm doing here. Careful. But anyways, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for public schools. I'm losing track of my thing here. All People says Dubois was a commie, probably. And Places says school is a scam. And Peter says we homeschooled from day one. That's good. My daughter is well ahead of others in the same age. Absolutely, they would be. If you do the job, they will be. Some people use it as a way to hide abuse. That is true, but it's rare. But they will showcase it in the media if that happens, to make homeschooling look like something wrong with it. Armand says entertainment used to be things like attending shows and talking with friends. Today it's watching e-girls say random things like hot dog, yum. Yeah. Peter says full spectrum light versus LED has health implications. Arakel also, it says LEDs have invisible flicker that's harmful. Places says crazy though, parents should be involved with their kids. Yeah, they should. And that's again, I say it all the time, pet peeve. I get on my soapbox because I've worked in daycares, I've worked with public schools, with private schools, with school bus companies, and with the Juvenile Justice Authority. Parents, the majority of them, do not know their kids at all. They don't know them. They don't even like them. They don't even really want them. They won't tell you that. They go, oh, everything's for my kid. And they hate their kid. And they don't know them. Their kid is a roommate. And they push them off on public school and let them raise them. And guess what? They will. And they should be involved, but they're not. Prime says, stroke uncle's luxurious fur for me. Yeah, he's soft too. It used to be really rough when he was an outdoor cat, but he softened up. His fur has gotten better. Nature Nerd says the government should not be allowed to force phase out old technology like incandescent lights and gas-powered vehicles. People should have the right to use old tech. Yeah, they shouldn't have the right to, but they do because we've allowed them to get away with it for so long. Preparedness says all my lights are LED. Had them since 2009. They give me headaches if I'm exposed to them for too long. I start getting a headache. And all people wants to know, does Uncle really weigh almost 20 pounds? Yes. The first time we brought him into the vet and they put him on the scale, the vet was like, holy crap, he's 17 and a half pounds. And we hadn't even started taking care of him yet. He's bigger now. And he's not like fat. He's just large for his breed. He's really large for his breed, although he's getting a little chubby now, but because he doesn't want to go outside anymore. And all people says public schools are evil. Well, they're evil by association because of the policies that are attached to them. Because Slinka says, look up John Gotti for the truth about public schools. And Cruising says, preach it, David. Yeah, I try. If anybody will listen. And then, of course, again, you've got the internet right there. Look, you can look most of this up for yourself. And Peter says, I can't imagine not spending every day with my daughter. And good for you. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Fluke Man says, Trump says if he becomes president in 2024, he'll defund schools, teachers, wokeism, and fire all teachers for treating students differently depending upon their color, political views, protect Asians, and etc. I have heard that. I think I saw part of his speech on that because that is an issue. The purpose of public school, in my opinion, I always start from the Montessori perspective. Montessori schools, which I recommend instead of Head Start, if anybody can afford to do it, because Head Start is a zoo, okay? Your kids aren't learning anything there except how to be animals. The Montessori method I approve of, and it has never changed to my knowledge. Basic logic and tactile skills, stacking, and depth perception, stacking blocks, assembling things, stuff like this. Basic mathematics, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, weights and measures, things like this. Very important. Reading, writing, and reading comprehension. All the rest of it is extra. If you can get that, you can do anything. All right. And that's what school should teach. They should not teach you what to believe or how to interact outside of just being courteous, which is, again, Montessori school. Because, and just to give you an example, Bams says Uncle tries to become the overman. And then what is it? Preparedness says the university system is just as insidious, if not worse, a complete scan. Yeah, the universities and colleges have gotten bad. They really have. But just as an example, when you go to Head Start or kindergarten, they will force you to share, okay? And you're too young for that from a psychological perspective. The concept of sharing, it needs to be developed naturally. You can't force that. It's more important to teach someone to be patient than it is to share. And this is the Montessori approach. So if I'm playing with Duplo blocks, which are basically big Legos, all right? I'm playing with Duplo blocks and Johnny comes over and he wants to play. In Head Start or kindergarten, the teacher will force me to share with Johnny. Now me and Johnny kind of have a problem because we're too young for the concept. But that's what they do. That's the public school system talking. In Montessori school, you're not allowed to do that. The teacher will come over. Well, Johnny, Jim is playing with the Duplos right now. Jim has the Duplos for about 15 more minutes. I can schedule you to go in behind Jim and you can play when he's done. and that's what they'll do. That's how it will be handled. Johnny, of course, or Jimmy, when his 15 minutes are up, they're up, no argument. You're done, move on to something else. And the other kid has to wait. And you can learn some very important structure that way. Very important structure. All people, says many in the U.S. have medical conditions that forbid them to use LED bulbs, which is the main reason why Congress was not able to force the bulbs on the public as it planned in the 1990s. And that was the biggest argument in the late 90s, really, I think. But that was the biggest argument from them at the time when they were trying to combat it was, hey, incandescent, that's 100% American. It's our legacy. It started here, incandescent bulbs. And we manufacture them here. All this LED garbage comes from China. Plus, if you dispose of a bulb, an incandescent bulb, you've got glass and metal. That's your trash. When you get rid of an LED bulb, there's all kinds of chemicals in there that you're putting into the landfill. Cougar says that since the WHO treaty was signed, do you think the next pandemic is launched and the ejection will be forced? They tried to force it the last time. And for the most part, didn't have to because most people just knuckled under anyway. But we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me. Savage says, anybody here ever scalped a string of Christmas lights, skin the wire on each side, wrap it around a round magnet, put a bar in the middle, and poof, forever light? Anyone? Just me? I don't think most people would have done that. And Places says math is important too. Cruising says, has to be the right school, otherwise it's no better than the rest. My niece went to one and all she learned was the BS that they do in public schools. My brother wasted thousands. And Peter said, sharing is caring. Yeah, if you're a Care Bear, sometimes it's okay and sometimes it isn't. But forcing a young person to share, it causes issues. But yeah, Cruising's right, has to be the right school. You can't just throw a kid into a private school. You really need to investigate it first. You do. Bam says, I think half of schools should be physical activities. Yeah, and they've gotten rid of a lot of that as well. And Prime says basic philosophical principles should be taught. My nephew skipped a grade because he's a memorization machine, but no logic in this kid's head. And they used to. They used to start Aesop's fables in junior high school, and they've gotten away from all of that. And it's important. Philosophical study can be important when the child's old enough to comprehend it and their reading comprehension skills are good enough, because it allows them to think from other people's perspectives instead of trying to superimpose theirs on everybody, which is what we have now. Cruising says they're forcing you to share because they want you programmed from the age of 5 to think it's okay to have your stuff taken away from you. So at 18, you don't revolt when you pay taxes. That wouldn't surprise me. That fits. In Places says the IRS loves checks written in squares and circles. And All People says the epileptics and individuals who get migraines or may get TIAs or strokes or have MS, SLE, so on, etc., and depression and anxiety are told by doctors to not use LED bulbs. Well, now they're not going to have much of a choice. And Zane says patience is key. And Arakel says Romans picked the strong kids, got rid of the weak. Well, most societies did. Most societies did. Now look where we are. Look where we are. Now, this is important. This is actually an important article, but not for the reason you think. I'm going to read this and I'm going to expose it as the fraud that it is. Am I looking at the right one? Hang on a second. I don't think that's the right one. Let me try the other one, because I got a couple of things pulled up here. I want to make sure I open the correct thing. Is it this one or is it this one? I think it's this one. Okay. I don't want to be off track too far here. Cruising says, back when I bothered making videos because people clearly didn't want to hear what I had to say, I used to harp on the fact that the public school system is creating a huge amount of mental illness. And then Zane says, Romans also owned slaves, but we know that's bad. They're still slaves. We're wage slaves now, though. But here, this is the Daily Caller, and it says nearly half of millennials believe misgendering should be illegal. From a poll, a substantial portion of millennials aged 25 to 34 agree that misgendering should be a crime, according to polling conducted exclusively for Newsweek that was published on Saturday. Now, this is important. This is important, but like I said, not for the reason that you might think. Not for the reason that you might think. Now, let me see if I can find the right part of the article. Okay. I don't want to lose my place. The survey found that 44% of individuals aged 25 to 34 believe referring to someone by the wrong gender pronoun should be a criminal offense, while 31 of them disagree, according to Newsweek. The remaining 25% neither agree nor disagree, or they don't know. Now, they throw numbers out there like this. They throw a poll out there like this, okay? And it's put on Newsweek. And this is by Redfield and Wilson Strategies. Key phrasing on the word strategies, by the way. Redfield and Wilson Strategies, which does polling. And I've met, preparedness says it sets a bad precedence. It's also misleading and inaccurate. And I'll tell you why. And Cruising here says that 44% of individuals aged 25 to 34 are the same type of people that would burn a woman at the stake for knowing how to make willow bark tea. Yeah. Zane says the Inca had the world's most successful planned economic system. They used to also sacrifice about 30% of their population to the sun god, too. I think that was the Incas. The Incas, the Mayans, and the Aztecs all did a lot of human sacrifice. And they never had the wheel either, by the way. Fluke says, so children share homemade lunches, not just allergies and personal taste. They are different quality bread, ham, cheese, etc. Don't think parents paid for quality food exchanges for cheap stuff. Most kids eat the school lunch, though. But sharing lunch, that's on them. I'm sure most of what they're eating isn't good anyways. But what they say is they suggest nearly half of millennials believe misgendering should be illegal. Now, again, once upon a time, I worked for a polling system in the early 90s. What they do is they deliberately handpick a select demographic. They take a select group of people and they cherry pick them to force results. Number one. Number two, they pick an even number of interviews or polls, and then they do a percentage graphic based on that. And that's supposed to represent the entire population. It's extremely misleading. Most important part of the article I'm going to read right now. The poll surveyed 1,500 people. So Redfield and Wilson's strategies, and their strategy, by the way, is to get the results they're paid to find, which is what happened when I worked for the polling service. Okay. And I don't remember the name of it. I'm sorry, because I only worked there for a few months in the early 90s. Redfield and Wilson's strategies, the strategy is to cherry pick a demographic. They interviewed or surveyed 1,500 people and used that to come up with 44% of individuals aged 25 to 34. And that number is supposed to reflect the entire American population. But they only spoke to how many? 1,500 people who are eligible U.S. voters, which means they were over 18. 1,500 people over the age of 15. You know, if I were to go down to, I think, what is it called? Five Corners? Is it Five Corners or Four Corners in Atlanta, which is where a lot of like gay clubs and stuff are, okay? And I went out on the street and I surveyed 100 people or 150 people, 200 people, so I could have an even number to work with for percentage purposes, and asked them about alphabet stuff. And you know what I mean. Most of the people I'm going to talk to down there are probably going to be gay, and I'm going to get a positive response for whatever I'm looking for. I'm cherry picking my demographic. And then I can sit there and say, X percentage of number of people that I surveyed said this, but it's not the truth. And neither is this. This is misinformation. This is a lie. But they put out that title, and this is Newsweek. Okay. This is Newsweek, because this is the Daily Caller, but they're reprinting Newsweek's article. There it is right there. Conducted exclusively for Newsweek. Newsweek hired Redfield and Wilson Strategies to give them a result, and they did. But people will read that and see that percentage and say, holy shit, that many? Because they don't dig into it to find out what the truth actually is. Wow, how far behind am I, guys? You know, I think I've lost track of I've lost track of the comments. I apologize. I'll see if I can catch up here somewhere. I apologize again. Where are we here? Let me see. Bams said, best thing you can do for a child is to teach them how to be able to think independently. I agree. And Cruising said, I think I read that. I apologize again. I'm all over the place. All People says home, economics, English grammar, government history, trade, skill, office skills, driving, transportation, most perhaps only worthy subjects taught in Western public high schools. They barely touch on that stuff anymore. And, here we go. Why is this giving me a hard time? Dragon says we have far more urgent issues going on in the world than misgendering or using the wrong pronouns. I agree. Zane says, and the Mexican Empire, aka Aztecs, sacrificed 30% of the population. Dragon says there's a huge capacity for this being abused by those being spiteful in the community. All People says your explanation and exposure of polling is 100% accurate. Preparedness says 1,500 as a representation of 300 million says a lot about the agenda. And it's more than that. The official number, because we looked it up a little earlier, was about 324 million. But when you count illegals, homeless, whatever, it's probably closer to 400. You know, my best guess is 380, 400 million people actually in this country. 1,500 cherry-picked individuals to give as close to the response you were looking for as possible is not fair or honest. Zane says the Maya believed in self-blood sacrifice with no mention of taking human life. Helter says this is going to be used to falsely accuse anyone for any number of reasons, like being accused of witchcraft back in the day because someone had some personal beef with you. And considering these people are highly susceptible and spiteful, one can easily see how this is going to turn out. More power to the insane crowd. Yeah, I'm sure this is going to work wonderfully. Indeed. Let me catch up here a little bit more. Places says 1,500 people with purple hair. That could be. That could be, because we don't know specifically who they spoke to, because that's anonymous. But it's not hard. Or if you've ever done an online poll, and then suddenly you get kicked out of the poll and it says, sorry, it's full, try another survey. Their system kicked you out because you weren't given the answers they're looking for. Zane says Mayan peasants didn't need to bleed themselves. You guys are still arguing about that. Shame on you. Hasdrubal says they have to split. I'll finish watching later. Many thanks, Dave and all. Peace out. Well, thanks for joining us today, Hasdrubal. And Cruising says, Helt is right. The thought crimes of wokeism and the new age version of witch hunts. You don't even have to be guilty to be targeted. Just not look how they want you to. Then you're tied to a stake. Fluke Man says, is your username also your email address? Only asking because when I tried to order you cat food, they asked for it. Thought it'd be best to give them your contact details. No, it is not. My username is not also my email address. You're having the hardest time with that because I remember you asking about that a few weeks back, and I don't understand how, because people have sent cat food to the P.O. box in the past, and I don't know why you have such a difficult time. Actually, try this. Here, I'll throw that one up there. You can try that one. And DIY says, do you think boats are good for SHTF? If they can get you past the 3-mile limit and you're comfortable sitting out there for months at a time, and you can get out, because remember, harbors can be closed just like roads. And if you've ever noticed, there is a bottlenecking positioning on a lot of them. They're not open waterways necessarily. So boats can be trapped. Boats can be trapped. And Fluke Man says, wow, great memory. I try. I can't remember everything, but I do try. I needed to point that out anyways, that particular article, to demonstrate what a load of crap a lot of that stuff really is, and how dangerous it is to believe in those polls. You can't trust them. Any of them. I don't care, because you can make a poll. You can control a poll to be good or bad at any time. To be good or bad at any time. You cannot stop that. You can't trust them. So always, always, always be cautious about when you see poll numbers. And Zane was saying there that, yep, harbors get pretty costly. Yeah. If there's, especially if you've got to store your boat, or you have certain places you got to launch from, but a harbor can get bottlenecked just like a roadway or a highway or something. If they don't want you to travel, you're not. And Cruising says, even the way you phrase the question can determine the results. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. And I'm going to go ahead and get ready to sign off here, as we're just over an hour. And thank you again for everybody who has joined us here today. Very much appreciated dropping in and dropping by and carrying on the conversation. Always more talking points to go. But I'll go ahead and sign off, and maybe we'll get to do this again sometime soon.